Welcome to part 5 in my series on drum kit ergonomics and setup. Today we're going to continue talking about toms. Hopefully this is a shorter video. I'm just going to get a couple things in about tom angle and height because we already went over sort of horizontal placement around the kit. So I do have a whole video on snare drum height and placement that you should go watch if you're interested. I'll put a link to it somewhere here. But this diagram is a snare drum diagram, but it relates to the toms because, of course, the toms are dependent on the snare drum for their sort of minimum distance to you. So if you look at this, they have 3 drummers facing the left here. So drummer A here, the circle that represents his elbow is in front of his torso. And this isn't good because that means he's extending to reach what we're going to assume is the center of his snare drum. So he would want to bring his snare drum closer so that his arm could relax. Drummer B is in a great position because his shoulder and elbow are vertical from one another and he doesn't have to reach to get to his snare drum. Person C over here, their elbow is behind the torso, and that means they are sucking back and again putting strain on their shoulders just to get to their snare drum. It's not good. In this diagram, you can see we have a tom and a snare in both A and B. The drummer would be facing left, so you'd have the snare, and then in front of that, you'd have a tom. So in A, the tom is flat and it's relatively low. That makes it easy to reach from a height perspective, but difficult to reach from a distance perspective. In B, the tom is highly angled, and therefore it is able to overlap the edge of the snare a little bit, so you have a shorter distance between the snare head and the tom head horizontally, but a larger distance vertically. So counterintuitively, A is better for people who are taller and B is better for people who are shorter because people with long arms can reach out to that tom easily. People with short arms can't, so they need to go up in order to keep the horizontal distance smaller. So like young students, for example, benefit a lot from the angled tom that is closer because their snare drum is just not going to get any smaller for the most part. So they need their toms as close as they can. Although there's nothing wrong with angled drums as long as you aren't cranking your wrist back to hit them. So I'm not sure whose kit this is. I just pulled it off of Google, but if they're not 7 feet tall, I doubt this kit is ergonomic for them. These toms are so high and so flat that they would be very difficult to reach for most normal-sized people. This is Lars Ulrich's Metallica kit from 1992, and if he wasn't so short, this would make no sense. But these toms are so highly angled that if someone who was 6 feet tall played this, they would probably have to crank their wrists back or hit the heads at a really steep angle. So we'll look at this kit from the beginning once again. It's Keith Moon in, I think, 1966. And you can see that his toms are pretty low and flat, but they're right in front of him, and it looks like his arms are plenty long enough to reach them. So this is a pretty ergonomic tom setup in every regard.